What's up, guys? On today's episode, we are heading up to New Milford, Connecticut to help my buddy Ted pull a doodlebug out of the woods. Now, the big question is, what is a doodlebug? Once I arrived, you can really see that this is, or maybe once was, an active farm. What's wild to me is it's just about 20 minutes north of where I live. It's like a totally different world, yet so close. Anyhow, it's gorgeous. The birds are chirping. There's a huge red barn, an amazing American flag on the side of the house, and of course, a very American Pie kind of feel going on here. First, Ted showed me inside of his barn, and obviously inside you'd find exactly what you'd expect from a car guy. Lots of car parts and in-progress projects, from Vespas to hot rods to farm tractors. This is a man who makes stuff, fixes stuff, and lives quietly. He's just an awesome dude that can literally fix just about anything. Now, a couple of weeks ago, he brought the 1969 Le Mans back from the dead after sitting in a garage for nearly 22 years. But I'm not as confident about starting an old tractor that's been sitting outside, buried in the woods for about 8 years, and is nearly 100 years old. The reason we went to the workshop first was because he was playing with an old alternator that he pulled off another random vehicle that we will need later on the Doodlebug once we hack down all the branches and the overgrowth. To get to the back of the farm with all his tools, we loaded up the 1939 GM 3/4 ton, which, of course, started right up better than most modern cars today. On the way towards the back of his property, where the Doodlebug was kind of sitting and rotting, we stopped by the Macan to load up any extra cameras and the tripods, all the stuff I had in my car, and we put it in his work truck. On the journey around the barn, you can see that he's been tinkering with cars for a while. There's lots of spare parts and future projects pretty much everywhere. Once he told me we were in the area, I literally couldn't see the bug at all until you get about a few feet inside the brush, and then you could see the back of the trailer, which was attached to the tractor.
All right, so, yeah, this is the trailer part, and I think this is the back half. I don't know, mid to late 30s Ford. That's the back. It's had a wheelbarrow rigged. Has a little dumpette. And a tractor seat was used, and a Plymouth steering wheel. And the original Model A tank was rusty, so they put an auxiliary one under. I'm just glad we don't see any bees.
So step one is pretty simple. Remove all the brush and the prickers, which there were a lot of, by the way, to get access to the engine and the wheels. Now, while I was playing with that, Ted brought the truck up to the other side of the trees for easy access to the clippers and the chainsaw and all that kind of stuff. Clearly, this had been sitting here for a very long time, as it had trees growing around it and in it, so this would be the first time it would be free in quite some time. Let's take a look.
Do we need the shot of kicking the tire?
Okay, with a bit more access now, Ted checked the engine to get a game plan for what he would need from the barn with respect to tools and jumper packs to get this thing firing, and during the inspection, he started to play with the transmission, and we found our very first hurdle. The transmission was frozen. Once the shifter was removed, he headed up to the barn to clean up the rust and the gunk with a wire wheel and a few whacks from a hammer. Although now the shifter was in better shape, the tranny was still stuck, so Ted used the crank handle to see if the tractor was in gear. Nothing going. Next, he had me wiggle the shifter while he was using the crank handle at the same time, trying to break it free.
How's it feel?
Feels nice. But again, no dice. So it was time to disassemble the top cover to get access to the gears themselves to see what's going on inside.
And once we get it into neutral, then that can go back on. We'll see why it's frozen. See, there's a series of rods that run in and out of here. There's probably some rust built up in there.
To answer my earlier question, Doodlebug is a slang name for a homemade tractor during World War II when tractors were in short supply. The Doodlebugs of the 1940s were typically made from Model A's or Model T Fords from the 20s, like this one here, which were the bodies of older Fords that were either modified or removed altogether. During the Great Depression, when money and supplies were at an all-time low, conversion kits were expensive. As much as $300 for a farmer in the 40s is equivalent to nearly $6,000 in today's economy. So farmers just simply did it themselves for about 20 bucks. And the process was coined the Handy Henry in magazines such as Popular Mechanics that provided instructions on how to convert your old truck into a useful tractor with basic tools every farmer had. With the transmission cover removed, you can clearly see the gears are rusted together from water leakage, but after a few whacks in the right spot, they were encouraged to move again.
That's reverse. Reverse works.
It's spinning now.
Gotcha. So if we were rebuilding this, if this was a proper restoration, we'd take this all apart and source a set of better gears. But since it's an old farm tractor, it just needs to drag around some firewood. We're just going to get her moving, lube it up good.
Next, Ted used sandpaper to remove the corrosion on the points for it to even have a chance of firing up.
In the old days, a repair garage or a dealership might keep a rebuilt distributor right on the shelf, and then just swap it out when a customer came in from a tune-up, and then that evening or later on, or rebuild it and put it back on the shelf for the next guy.
Afterwards, he put fresh gas in it, and we both hoped more stayed in than leaked out, but luckily it was perfect, and for whatever reason, it held gas. Next, with the points closed,
They look like they're closed, right?
I don't know what I'm looking at.
the jump pack on, and the ignition on, Ted now tested the spark, which of course didn't work on the pack alone. So then he installed a new bigger battery along with the jump pack, and then it sparked, which is an amazing sign.
So we have spark.
Oh, wow.
Now that we were over hurdle number 2, we focused on the borrowed alternator and installed that. Plus, we filled the radiator with water and hoped that it didn't leak.
So tell me what you're doing right now.
Okay, we're going to pull the spark plugs out and put a little oil in the cylinders just to give them a little bit of lubrication. They've been sitting for a while.
At this point, with no water or gas leaking, with all the plugs out, he squirted some oil into the cylinders and slowly cranked the engine by hand to disperse the lubrication around the cylinders. After all of that, we were looking pretty good, so he reinstalled the plugs and then hooked up the distributor, and we were ready to go.
Starter button stuck.
Unbelievable. Can't believe it did that.
They're incredibly durable.
Now with the engine running, we really needed to free up the transmission to get it into first or even second gear at minimum to get it out of the woods and hopefully up to the barn. To ensure that we could actually get it out of the woods, he manually placed the tractor and transmission in first gear, which I thought was pretty clever to do that by hand, before bolting down the cover. Before our big attempt of removing the tractor, we realized that the rear tire wouldn't be able to get past the tree, which was covered in vines, so we had to remove that as well. Now, seemingly all systems were ready to go. I got a last-minute pep talk from Ted.
There's zero safety.
Watch my what?
Watch your fingers on the chains, because there's nothing between you and that spinning tire chain.
And we were ready to pull it out.
Set is with the spring seat. You get bouncing around and the throttle's kind of hard to operate. And this is your choke, this lever under here. You'll give it one quick pull up when it's while it's cranking. The way to make it crank is to step on that small pedal right there.
Got it.
And you know, clutch in and ignition on, pull the choke, step on the starter, it'll crank a little bit, should fire right off. Yep. Pull this down.
I can't believe it's running. Oh, it opened up! Woo! Woo! This is pretty trick too.
Yeah, and it dumps. So that's the whole point, was if you
You
didn't
can
have
do
the
it right
trailer.
here, like while you're
Right.
driving.
Once we got the Doodlebug out of the woods and up to the barn/workshop, which by the way is completely insane to me, I can't believe we actually did it, Ted then changed the oil in both the engine and the transmission, as well as replaced the wheels. Step one, of course, is to lift the front and rear and then get them on jack stands before draining the engine oil. Next was the transmission oil, and check this out, it was totally full of water and clearly why it didn't work.
Oh, water. Oh, yeah. That needed to be changed.
Then, pretty much like everything else, the battery terminals were also rusted at the block and the starter, so those needed to be cleaned and sanded for a better connection, all while the engine and the transmission were draining at the same time. Once everything was good to go, Ted reattached everything. Now, with the plugs back in, Ted filled the engine with 30W non-detergent, if you're taking notes, and the tranny with a funnel and 600W gear oil, which looks more like syrup than it does oil, but Ted changed the tire in the meantime because it took forever to actually drain in, with a newer tire from his collection of spare parts in the barn. With the very quick tune-up behind us now, Ted fired it right up, it sounded great, and he put it on the trailer for the morning drop-off at the Ammo studio.
Straight back. All right. That's awesome. I can't believe it's in here.
Well, this vehicle, I just use it just to move wood around the farm, and any way we can get it cleaned up, I want to preserve it, try to make it last the rest of my life. You know, just as a work utility vehicle, not looking for any sort of show car, and just see what type of magic you can do with it.
So with that, it's now time to get this thing a bit cleaner and protected to slow the rate of oxidation. The trick here is to leave as much patina in place, but at the same time, remove the flaky stuff and soak the metal in protection so it can last yet another 100 years. Step one, of course, is to remove all the vines that have been growing in every crevice around the axles. There's tons of leaves and spider webs and junk pretty much stuck everywhere. Now, clearly, as a detailer, this is a bit of a lost cause, but as a car guy and a fanatic about the stories behind why and how vehicles were made in the past, the Doodlebug deserves a bit of pruning for its dedicated years of service. Hey guys, I want to give you a quick update on the car detailing simulator. The free-to-play demo version of the game is now going live, which means you'll be able to try the game for yourself and use the Ammo downloadable content, which includes the exact model of the Ammo studio with all the original artwork on the walls, all the products, tools, and exotic cars that you see in the videos. For more information, click the link in the description to check out the game on Steam.
Well, guys, the tractor is in the studio, and I have to say that cliche statement of, you know, they don't make things like they used to, it couldn't be more true here. And what I mean by that is it's been sitting in the woods for 8 years. It's crazy old, and somehow he got it started, and it ran, and it's in here now. That is absolutely amazing. I love the idea that we can sort of keep these older things and keep them around and actually use them. He carries wood at his farm. To me, that's just, it's so much more tangible, so much more, I can chew on that. It makes sense to me as opposed to, like, we buy things these days. Sorry, I'm on a little bit of a tangent here. We buy things, we use them, and we throw them away. The fact that we can keep this here and preserve it and be able to use it again, it's amazing. I love these kinds of stories. Anyways, for those of you who are going to leave a comment or what have you, obviously, I'm not going to repaint it. There's not a whole lot that I can do to this, but I am going to power wash it. I am going to scrub it down with a scrub pad and remove a bunch of the stuff that's flaking off and then protect it. Think of it like, if this was a Ferrari or something, I would be putting coatings and sealants and waxes and oils, so to speak, on here to protect it. I'm going to do the same thing. Obviously, there's no paint or anything left. It's all fallen off. So I'm going to preserve the metal and kind of slow the rate of oxidation and let this be something that he has for the rest of his life, and then hopefully passes it on to the next farmer. But anyways, sorry. I just think this is awesome. I love the concept. I love the idea. I love the fact that he's going to use it again. I'm really excited. Let's do this.
With the compressor charging, I then applied tightened degreaser to the caked on grimy spots to help loosen them up before scrubbing with a thin wire brush to get into all the tight spots. Again, if I had a dry ice blaster, it would have been really helpful here, but since this was unexpected, there was no way to get ice quickly, even if I had rented the machine and the oversized compressor, so hand scrubbing and power washing will have to suffice as it has in the years past. While the second layer of degreaser was soaking again, I used the compressor to flush out all the trapped leaves, mud, and spider webs, and I certainly displaced a lot of makeshift homes over the 8 years it was sitting in the woods. On the engine, the grease just oozed off and covered my floor, and although tedious, the metal brush and degreaser was actually pretty effective. Next, I power washed the loosened grime and everything just poured off the old tractor. Such a great feeling blowing off years of mold and growth. Once most of the loose stuff was removed, I put my new Boost anti-corrosion additive into the foam gun and soaked the bug. Now keep in mind, this had been sitting outside for 8+ years. A little soap everywhere is not going to hurt anything.
Now, I've washed a lot of cars before, but I've never washed one with Scotch-Brite. We're using Scotch-Brite 98, and we're just gonna try to remove as much of the leftover heavy junk, a little bit of the paint, and kind of just get that flakiness off. So here it goes, car wash with Scotch-Brite.
Ugh, listen to that sound. It's a detailer's nightmare, but obviously on this preservation, it was totally necessary. Likewise, I chose the mild scrub pad instead of the more coarse versions because Ted asked if I could leave as much of the original patina as possible, just remove the flakiness that might interfere with the fluid film in the next step. As you can see, the dirty old paint and junk just filled the scrubber and came out in the sink. It was really gross. After the scrub down, the final rinse was absolutely amazing, super therapeutic, as a ton of surface mold and brown stuff, junk, whatever, just came off the tractor. You could almost feel the tractor go, ah, it was so nice. Next was a very thorough dry with compressed air to prepare for the fluid film coating in the next step. Once I was done with the drying, the remaining flaky bits were removed and the tractor, although still a tired, rusted out Frankenstein of a vehicle, it looked a little bit better. But more importantly, its aura was brand new and it was ready to get back to work. After its thorough bath, I visited my local parts and supply depot, aka Steve from across the street, to borrow his fluid film sprayer.
Hook up to the air hose and point and spray.
And then this will slow the corrosion. Stop the corrosion.
Yeah, this will prevent the oxygen from getting down to the metal and it'll retard the corrosion process.
Right.
You've already got pretty deep corrosion from what you showed me in the pictures. This will slow it down.
It's a Survivor car. It'll be fine. He's gonna throw some wood in the back of
You've got
it.
a regulator here for the air pressure and you can tweak it here for your spray pattern.
Got it. Coat it. You're the man. Thank you, Steve.
Steve also suggested that I go to Lowe's and pick up the aerosol can version of fluid film so I can hit the tight spots as well. Now, to spray the film, I pulled the bug outside as my floors are supposed to get refinished yet again. That's a whole other subject. And covering the surface, meaning my floors, and rust prevention sort of oil lubrication is probably not helpful to the guys who are going to put the new cover down, hopefully soon. Likewise, because this is going to be airborne, meaning I'm using compressed air, I cleaned my full face mask with a bit of Obey just so I could see out of it. And then I got the air lines, and then I went to town coating the rusted out metal in this thick film. Just a quick FYI, if you're unfamiliar, fluid film is manufactured using a unique heating and blending process of unrefined wool wax, lanolin, and corrosion inhibitors to stop existing rust on contact by penetrating the metal, forming a self-healing barrier that is always active and it doesn't chip or crack, that kind of thing. It's commonly used as undercoating on street cars as well, so keep that in mind. I'm not exactly sure why I feel the need to have to say this. Maybe it's YouTube, I'm not exactly sure. But the goal is not to remove the rust. It's too far gone. It would need to be replaced and refinished and the whole thing. My purpose here is to prolong what life it does have and make it as useful to Ted as long as he can keep it running. Preservation, as opposed to restoration, is more akin to long-term care nurses than, let's say, a plastic surgeon. You just have to have a different mindset going into the job. In today's society of use it and throw it away type mentality, working on a vehicle that's been around for nearly 100 years and still functions is a healthy reality check from the fleets of supercars sort of squeezing the engine to get the last mile per hour on their top speed, etc. It kind of makes me wonder if today's finicky cars will stand the test of time. So to do that, I'll make a follow-up video in 2121, so be sure to subscribe to watch that one. Per Steve's advice, for the super tight spots and the wheels, I used that sniper nozzle thing on the aerosol, and then I rubbed it in by hand the best I could to sort of soak everything. And the Doodlebug was looking really good, and it was ready to go back inside and basically just soak overnight so all the metal could be penetrated. Finally, when the Doodlebug was inside, as a joke, and I say as a joke, everyone on YouTube, I had to apply tire dressing just to do it on a car this old. It was super cool, and it's definitely the first time I've ever worked around a tire chain to put tire dressing on, so I just had to do that. And then I cleaned up the radiator just a touch so that it would sparkle a little bit better for when Ted walked in. I was really excited to have him see it.
Well, guys, we're all done, and the Doodlebug looks great. Now, what I mean by that is it's preserved. It's exactly what Ted wanted. We pulled it out of the woods. It's been sitting there for a very long time, and it's been in his family for a very long time. So this vehicle, I'm going to say, represents so much more to me than just detailing it. Yes, I should have sanded it. Yes, we should. There's a million things we could have done, but we did exactly what he wanted to do, which was to preserve this survivor. But what I mean by it means so much more is you think about Ted. Ted figured out, and he knows how to start these engines. I think modern cars today, if one little thing is wrong, they don't run. This thing sat forever, and he put a little bit of oil in it and water and did his little magic, and it worked. And I think, to me, that represents so much more about what's going on today. We need to be able to keep these things and preserve them, and just, we have a little bit of oil on here, great. Does it look fantastic? No, but it's awesome, right? And I think people like Ted as well, we're losing a lot of those guys who can wrench on anything and make things work. I just love those types of guys. They just figure it out and they make things work. And I'm just privileged to be around. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, you know where to find me. A huge thank you to North American Motor Car for letting me borrow Ted for a little bit. The guy's a genius. He works there. They pretty much find all these crazy cars that are just like this and get them running and back on the road again, which, as you know, I'm just a huge proponent. So I have much love for this vehicle, this detail, or whatever you want to call it. It was just fun to be a part of it. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. What's up, man?
Hey, Larry.
What do you think?
Wow, look at the Doodlebug. That looks fantastic.
It's no longer a bug. It's just a doodle.
Wow, it's cleaned up good.
Yeah, the amount of branches and things I took out is crazy, but totally makes sense since it was living in the woods. But
Wow,
it is so cool, this thing.
looks fantastic.
I mean, Larry, you know that I don't have the patience to do, like, I'll hit it with a hose, and I'm like, all right, that's good. You know, and then you yell at me.
Yes.